When I think about my grandmother, the picture that comes to mind is not the usual one, not knitting needles, not flower beds, not warm pies. No, I see her in a work jumpsuit. Her hands covered in grease, with those deep lines on her forehead that appeared whenever she bent over an engine. Because my grandmother spent 45 years working at an auto repair shop, I grew up surrounded by the smell of gasoline, the clatter of tools, and the metallic ringing of hammers. All of that came from her. She was a legend in our town, though she never once called herself that. For her, the only thing that mattered was that the car drove after she fixed it, that the owner left satisfied, and that she knew in her heart she had done the job right. When Grandma first started, times were different. Women weren't hired at garages. They told her, "You're too delicate. This isn't women's work. Better go to a store." But she stubbornly came back again and again until they finally took her. She had one goal: to prove she could understand cars just as well as any man. The first years were the hardest. Her colleagues laughed, saying she'd break a wrench before she ever loosened a bolt. But she clenched her teeth and kept going. She stayed after hours to practice, studying old broken engines that lay abandoned outside. Her hands were full of cuts and bruises, but in time they became true instruments. She could diagnose an engine by sound alone. She could close her eyes and tell from the starter's tone which part was worn out. Once, when I was still little, I visited her at work. A big old truck came into the garage. 4 men tried one by one to remove the gearbox, but none could manage it. Then Grandma stepped up, wiped her hands on a rag, and said, "Let me try." She made a few precise movements, and suddenly the gearbox came loose, as if it fell into her hands by itself. I'll never forget the looks around her: surprise, respect, even envy. That was the day I realized my grandmother was different. Through 45 years at the shop, she saw everything: cars after accidents, whole beat-up models barely held together, and expensive imports that broke down over the smallest faults. She never turned away from hard work. In fact, the harder the task, the more exciting it was for her. But there were hardships. I remember her coming home late at night, exhausted, but with a spark in her eyes. I remember the winters when the garage was freezing, when her hands grew numb and the metal burned with cold. I remember summers when the heat made the air heavy, and the fumes from gasoline made her dizzy. Yet she never complained. Her strength was in her faith in her craft. One time, when our town hosted an auto show, she was invited as a consultant. People came up to ask her questions about engines, and she answered calmly, precisely, as if she were reading from a manual written in her mind. She knew every bolt, every valve, every mechanism. That was the first time someone called her the car guru, and the name stuck with her ever after. When people asked me what my grandmother did, I proudly answered, "She fixes cars better than anyone." I could see their surprise. Society expected women in other roles, but Grandma broke those stereotypes, not by arguing, but simply by doing her work. Over the years, she trained countless young mechanics. They arrived for practice, some looking down on the old lady at first, but soon realized she was the one who could truly teach them. She explained patiently, showed them every motion, but always repeated, "The main thing is to listen to the car. It always speaks to you, you just have to learn how to hear it." I saw those boys come back years later, just to thank her. To them, she wasn't just a teacher, but proof that true mastery has no age and no gender. Now that Grandma is retired, her hands still remember the feel of metal. There's an old engine in her garage she won't let anyone throw away. She says, "Let it stay, in case I need to teach someone again." And even now, people come to her for advice. She steps outside, listens to the hum of an engine, and says, "That's the fuel pump, and those are the spark plugs." And she's always right. To me, she isn't just a grandmother. She is a person who proved you can change the world around you with determination and love for your craft. She endured years of doubt, hard labor, and physical pain, yet never broke. Instead, she became stronger. Sometimes she sits beside me and says, "You know, grandson, I regret nothing. Yes, it was hard, but I found myself. And if I had the choice to live it all again, I'd still go work at the auto shop." I listen to those words and understand. My grandmother truly became the car guru. And for me, She will always be the person who showed that real strength is not in muscles, but in character and in the ability to do your work with love.